Hi to everyone at Studio 3. My name is Josh Wise, and I came in and applied and had an interview recently with Liz, and I met the Photoshop guy. I believe his name was Greg. Both of them seemed great. So I just I was under the impression I was going to have a digital Photoshop test that day, and I don't know, I was ready. I didn't put my best foot forward as far as bringing in portfolio items with me that day, just expecting a Photoshop test. So I figured what might be the best idea was to kind of actually bring some of my work here so you can see it and send it right to you so you can see the structure of the file. As you can see, everything on the right has its own layer mask. It's completely non-destructible edits of the picture. So I click them on and off there. So we have all kinds of adjustments. We have gradient maps for kind of a tan look. We have fake makeup, which I did on Photoshop there. You can see it kind of pop off and on as I go through them. And also hair. And then the wings I made out of a digitally created, I guess you could say I took the notes from a picture on normal white and black and then just did some edits to them, which I kind of go through later to give it that effect. Then I made a lot of cutouts of feathers, and I darkened and lightened them, put on some gradient maps as luminosity layers to kind of bend light around them and light and dark areas. Now I'm going to do more work to them, and this image is definitely far from finished, but it's just something I'm currently working on, so hopefully it will give you a good idea of how I work. Now you can see everything on the right is in layer groups and also descriptive layers with masks. So I try and make my files easy to navigate. Um, you can just kind of click anything on and off a wheel or jump into channels and edit that mask if you need to add anything in or take it out. The groups keep everything together well, so it's easy to get around. Now I had one of my friends model for me with my guitar here, and I just shot it on a DSLR camera. It's a little grainy just because of the way we shot the picture, but I was just in experimental mode, so I didn't set it up too much. I just needed an image to work with. Now, as you can see here, it's kind of a musical scene. It's a woman with a guitar, and she's kind of got notes going across her face, a treble clef. So I'm trying to work in that paradigm here. Now here I'm just using Quick Mask to check my selection, and I do a lot of my masks in Quick Mask mode, but nowadays I pretty much save it mostly for things like hair. I like how you can drop the opacity on the edges and get that faded look. So for instance, here you can kind of see in some spots your hair fades in the background, especially individual strands that kind of snap out from the rest of it. It's very good for that. So just kind of checking. I need to go here. Oh, there's a good shot of the hair. Now with faded opacity, it is pulled very nicely from the background, and also saved as a layer mask, so I can do non-destructive edits at will. And then as far as Photoshop, I do everything non-destructively, at least as much as I can. I use layer masks and adjustment layers for about everything. I use smart objects sometimes, but I haven't found as much of a need for them, just with the fact that I can do almost everything I need to just with the non-destructive adjustment layers. And also, layer comps is a tool I use sometimes. I haven't used it as much. Usually I go one direction with a piece, but if I am doing kind of a bunch of client copies that are very distinct from one another, layer comps is a good choice for that. So here we're just fading out the selection a little bit more, and I kind of narrow her down, but once again I decide that I should use a clipping mask to kind of define the edges a little bit better on her arm and some of the areas where it's a very kind of black and white between her and the background, as opposed to the hair where it's a little bit more nebulous. I was painting it out here using Quick Mask, making sure I have my basic selection. And I start going through with the pen tool. And I've been using the pen tool for quite some time, especially in Adobe Illustrator. It works slightly different in Photoshop, but still I'm very used to it. And it's pretty intuitive in Photoshop after working with Illustrator. The commands are slightly different, but I have a pretty good mastery of it. So here I'm just going to go through and give us kind of a very cut and dried selection. Now, the workflow I kind of go through as far as most photography is I'll usually go after the exposure first and basically levels, light and dark, just kind of highlighting those points. And I use various methods. Sometimes there's a more mathematical approach where you can basically divide the numbers for the greatest highlights, the darkest darks, divide those and get a good middle gray and a deep black just by matching the numbers for the red, green, and blue channels, or things like for the middle gray, just multiplying or adding the numbers together and dividing by 3. But a lot of times I use the tools such as the interactive dropper, slider, and also things like just using the 3-color eyedroppers in the levels. Same for things such as hue and saturation. So I like to experiment with all different methods for color correcting photography. Um, Also things like replacing color from another photograph to get good skin tones. And gradient map, it can look pretty gaudy most of the time, the way it's used, but one way I have seen it used pretty well is to pull out some gold colors and use it as a gradient map. And if you put it at a very light setting up above skin, I've seen some very good kind of fake tans, I guess I should say, come out of it. They don't look fakey as in too orange, but if done right, it can give a pretty convincing tan on someone who's not so tan. So just different ways to do things like that. Some of the trickier stuff like adding convincing facial hair, just the high end and trickier Photoshop I love experimenting with as well. So things on that like digitally airbrushing from scratch. I really like that. I have Painter 12 as well on my computer, so between that and Photoshop, I can get pretty experimental. Also, just stuff like how to use the menus in conjunction, or the blend modes and the layers in conjunction, and get some creative effects. I always love creating textures as well, like in Photoshop, being able to create like a good brush metal texture from scratch, or just things like that where you might not have time to go look for it in stock photography, or you just want to make something that may not exist in stock photography. I just like having the versatility to use the tools in Photoshop to create about anything I can think of, and that's kind of where I'm working towards, just trying to learn every little back menu or hidden away item I may not know about, and how to use it. And eventually I'd like to become a Photoshop master. I figure I'll probably get Adobe certified if I can within the next year. And basically, in the meantime, I'm always reading a book or looking at a tutorial, or just always learning something new in Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. I use Flash and Dreamweaver as well. But yeah, I love the Adobe suite. I've been working on, well, let's see, Photoshop 5 was the first Photoshop I had, and after that, they eventually moved on to the suite, so I've kind of kept with it from there all the way through. I've been a big fan of Adobe throughout the years. Now here I'm really starting to come through with the pen tool. I've been using Adobe Illustrator for quite a while, probably since about 2002. So I've gotten pretty well versed with the pen tool. Of course, it's a little bit different in Photoshop, but basically the same beast. So here, just because we have such clear definition on the edge of the arm, it's the appropriate tool to use. So I'm going through and kind of making a more defined selection using the pen tool. Then I will later convert that to a selection and save it as letter mask. Now I do use vector masks as well sometimes, but lately, just because there is a chance I'll fade areas of the mask itself, sometimes I just like converting them to layer masks, giving them more rasterized feeling, but it still keeps the edges very crisp and clean. I'm just kind of working around the figure here. Now I like to use the load and save selection tools quite a bit. Saving selections is something that's been very handy for me, and I can save a multitude of selections or alpha channels, kind of bring them back as well. And I also like the fact that I can add them to another selection or do things such as intersections. So it makes it very handy just to keep kind of a list of all those saved selections, besides the channels kind of all by itself, which is also handy. I kind of use both tools. I will save some selections, but I will also use them as channels sometimes. Alright, now here we have most everything selected, so we just have a couple cutouts I need to pull out of there around the arm. Just doing that right now. The work path. Okay, here we are, approaching the end of the selection process here. So I make sure I get those fingers in the selection as well. While I'm working in the background here, one thing I've always loved about Photoshop is just the fact that you can accomplish things through a multitude of ways, and there's always about 10 ways to do things. So if I'm working on skin, for instance, I might use a healing brush. I use a patch tool quite often, especially for things a bit broader like bags under eyes. It's perfect for that. If the specular highlight is too high on skin, or if there's a sheen from sweat, there's too bright a light, patch tool works great for that as well. Now, there's some pretty experimental stuff out there too, or some tried and true methods some other photographers use that I've read about. Things such as pulling out the red channel and doing a facial scrub to take care of all the blemishes at once instead of using the healing tool. Or things like making a black and white test layer or something from the blue or red channel, because you can often see blemishes a bit more, and then just use that as a test layer when you're working with the healing brush to see things you wouldn't see in color. So I just love the fact that Photoshop's kind of experimental like that. So many ways to do. Alright, now we can use Quick Mask to see the selections about where I want it here. So I had originally cut out the background, giving it kind of that flame look as a temporary thing, but I decided I didn't like it and wanted to isolate her in general. So what I'm doing is working through two different selections here, just to try and add the selections together and get the desired outline I need. There we are, very close. Good selection now, so just check in a couple more times. And after that, we'll make the mask. It's just easy to separate her from the background. So here we have the non-destructive cutout from the background there. Saved as mask and can turn off or turn on, disable it will depending on needs. Nice crisp clean edges on that, of course. Nothing about where I want it. So after that I decided I was going to experiment with adding some wings, and I wanted those to be made out of kind of like old wrinkled music paper. I try to be versatile as far as creating images, so as opposed to actually finding some old wrinkled music notation, I decided just to Photoshop it quickly. So what I did was just grab some black and white music notation, kind of crisp and clean. I just pulled the whites out real quick. I put on a layer over top where I used layer on top overlay, there where I used overlay. So basically what I did was just took the white music, cut out the background, gave it kind of a yellow background layer underneath, and then I crinkled up some paper, changed that to a grayscale image, and put that on top as an overlay or a multiply layer. Kind of experimented with both to see which would give it the best texture. I also like something like luminosity for that, just for preserving kind of the lightness and darkness, I guess, of the paper and the crinkles. Now sometimes I'll do something like take a high pass filter to get some of that texture and then pop that over top as an overlay too. So I found that handy for things like skin textures. Okay, now here we are creating the paper textures I was talking about. So I'm kind of cutting some wing shapes out of it, but you can see from the layers on the right that I have a brown layer with kind of a layer mask of the wrinkles, and then I have another layer that's just wrinkles themselves, and they're in overlay blending mode. I have the notes on the second to the top layer, and then I have just kind of a background color. So it achieves a pretty quick and good kind of wrinkled, faded parchment look for the paper here. And what I'm doing is just kind of cutting out wings to make the angel wings I mentioned out of music that are going to go on the model at some point. So it's just a lot of cutting and pasting and layering of these wings and feather shapes.